right, it's Monday, which means it's time for our weekend box office report, brought to you by our friends at AMC Theaters. Coming in at number one for the fourth week in a row is Star Wars The Force Awakens, making an additional $41.6 million. The Force Awakens also climbed past Jurassic World on the worldwide all-time box office list into the number 3 spot with a total of $1.73 billion. Now only Titanic with $2.18 billion and Avatar with $2.78 billion are in front of it. Coming in second place this weekend is the new Leonardo DiCaprio film The Revenant, bringing in $38 million. In third spot is the Will Ferrell, Mark Wahlberg comedy Daddy's Home, making an additional $15 million to bring its domestic total up to over $116 million. In the fourth position is the new horror film The Forest, making $13.1 million. And rounding out the top 5 is the Tina Fey, Amy Poehler comedy Sisters, making over $7 million. John, what stands out to you about this week's box office report?
Obviously, Star Wars staying number one for the fourth, but The Revenant came a lot closer than I thought. Yeah. Like, it was leading in Friday and the Saturday numbers, and then it got passed by just like $3 million. Revenant did very good. But the other thing is this, that really stands out to me, Daddy's Home. If you had told me 4 weeks ago that, hey, Daddy's Home's going to open a couple weeks, it's still going to be against Star Wars in its prime right now, all that kind of stuff, and Daddy's Home is going to make north of $115 million, I'd say, man, that's really optimistic, but they've crossed over $115 million. That's impressive. The Forest doing over $13 million is also impressive to me. I didn't think it was going to fare that well. And Sisters stays in the top 5 for the fourth week in a row. It's almost made $75 million. All while going against Star Wars. So to me, that is impressive. The other thing, obviously, Star Wars now becomes the number 3 all-time box office thing, and it's I'm going to call it right now. Star Wars does not catch Avatar. I've been saying it the whole time. I think now that it's opened in China, we've seen the numbers that it's opened up in China with. It's now released everywhere it's releasing, and it is still over $1 billion behind Avatar. I'm calling it. The race is done. It's not going to catch Avatar. Still has a chance of catching Titanic, though. So let's keep an eye on that. Some really impressive stuff here. Anyway, Schnepp, what stands out to you?
Here's a question. If The Force Awakens comes out next year as a special edition, like how Lucas would tinker with stuff, it's that's kind of double dipping the audience.
It counts.
It counts. People would go see it. We added this special preview Rogue One or some weird, extra sweaty thing. I'm sure they'll do it.
We put the new Han Solo to narrate this movie. He'll be doing DVD commentary on Force Awakens.
We changed a couple things. We put the orange Yoda in at the beginning. It's a whole bunch of weird stuff. Some people are floating who weren't floating earlier. What stands out to me is definitely The Revenant, kicking it really hard, almost overtaking Star Wars for number 1.
Yeah.
And the comedies are still, those two comedies have a great stranglehold on the top 5. I mean, Sisters has been consistently in the top 5, and
for 4 weeks.
Yeah, it shows you that make sure if you're coming out with a comedy, open against Star Wars, because you will get all that flow over. Mm-hmm. You'll get all that because that's what's happening. People are going to the theater. Maybe Star Wars was sold out at the time that they wanted to go see it. They'll say, "Oh, let's see this movie," and then we'll see the later, Star Wars or whatever. It's working, so I think that's what sticks out. And I predict that The Forests, a sequel to The Forest, will be happening.
Mark?
Yeah, if you want to counter-program against Star Wars, you open a comedy with big stars in it, with Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, or Will Ferrell, Mark Wahlberg. You can do big business, but the big story to me is The Revenant. I mean, The Revenant only lost to Star Wars by $3 million. So another cold-weather team like the Vikings, all you needed was a field goal, The Revenant, and you just couldn't hit it when you had to do it. But, you look at The Forest, and that's a very impressive number, $13 million. I didn't even know this movie was coming out, and allegedly that's part of my job to know this stuff. I'm not very good at my job, and I acknowledge that. But not knowing that The Forest was coming out and that it made $13 million, holy crap, the studio's got to be thrilled about that.
Yeah, they shot out in a forest. It was free. They just had a camera. They paid the actress. They're like, what set do we even have? Maybe the beginning, somebody's kitchen, and then the rest of it's out in nature. Fog is free. They're like, just sleep again. A fog's almost coming. Everything was free.
So clearly somebody's studio apartment for all the other scenes.
Right.
I think, too, and this is unfortunate, but I think we'd be remiss not to mention that not in the top 5, despite going wide release and all this kind of stuff, was Hateful Eight. Mm-hmm. Hateful Eight only pulling in $6.3 million after going into wide release and adding how many more theaters? Adding almost 500 additional theaters on top of the 2,000 additional theaters from last week. It was out in how many theaters now? Almost 3,000 theaters.
Wow.
And I remember a good debate that me and a friend of mine had a few months ago about whether Revenant or Hateful Eight will do better at the box office. And we were having a discussion. I ended up agreeing with him. I started with The Revenant, but then he convinced me that, now look at the success of Django Unchained and how much money that made. He convinced me that Hateful Eight would kind of probably trump Revenant. And not the case. For whatever reason, something about this marketing campaign has not clicked with the audience. Right. I don't know. And I don't know if it was this misguided, and I'll call it misguided, emphasis they want to put on, we're doing the 70 millimeter. Nobody cares. No one cares, Quentin. Nobody cared. So I don't know if it was that, but I don't really think that was the reason.
I think, the biggest reason, Hateful Eight does not have a realistic bear attack. I mean, Revenant will mess you up. This is in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler. So
but that's
relax.
not Quentin's fault. Quentin told the Weinsteins, look, I need extra money for this really good bear.
I got this bear scene. It overtakes Kurt Russell in the beginning. They're fighting. They're like, no. They said no.
The original name of the movie was The Honey Loving Nine, and then they had to cut it down to Hateful Eight, the Marmalade Enthusiastic Nine, and they had to get rid of it.
But in all seriousness, I think it's safe to say Hateful Eight, it's not a flop. Somebody asked last week, is Hateful Eight a flop? No. The Hateful Eight as a motion picture in Hollywood, while Star Wars is out, has already made $41 million. It does not qualify as a flop, especially when you consider it's only cost about $45 million to make. It will probably end up losing a little bit of money, but it's by no means a flop. But I think it is safe to say it's a disappointment, especially when you consider Quentin's last movie, Django Unchained, which was so beloved and did so well financially. Why have people not been interested in the Hateful Eight?
I think a lot of it has to do with the critical reception. While it was very good for Hateful Eight, it's still on Rotten Tomatoes. It's not quite as high as you might expect a Tarantino movie around this time of year, and everybody is thinking The Revenant might be positioning himself for a great award season. We've already seen some of that fallout, and so people want to go see that. Plus, when you have DiCaprio and you have Tom Hardy and Inarritu all doing a film together in such a unique style of movie, these were two movies that were being released, and part of that marketing campaign was how unique the filmmaking process was. And I think people decided that they would rather see The Revenant and see how that movie was made versus The Hateful Eight.
Yeah, they both take place in the snow, so people are like, which snow movie are we going to see?
You can't see too many cold weather movies.
We just saw Star Wars.
Right.
Yeah.
That had some snow in it.
People were snowed out.
People were totally snowed out. One of the other things, that I'm glad you brought up the 70 millimeter, because I think that might have been something that detracted people from it as opposed to made people. I think people were confused because so many people are not cinephiles. Like Quentin's like, we're doing it in 70 millimeter. A lot of people don't even know what 70 millimeter is. Unfortunately, it's the truth.
He may have alienated them a little bit.
That's what I'm saying. I think that you can only see it in 70 millimeter. Well, it's not playing in 70 millimeter where I live. It's playing right there. It's just not in 70 millimeter. So it puts that barrier in people's minds. Well, I want to wait till I get to see that in 70. So I'm going to see this other snow movie with the bear. So you know what I mean? I'm like, I think something locked in with people with the 70 and I can't see it. So I'm not going to see it at all. It's one of those things.
Have you guys seen that meme of it's two pictures? At the top, it's Leo DiCaprio sitting at the Academy Awards with a disappointed look on his face, and underneath is a picture of the bear holding the Oscar. That was great.